Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Now I'll tell you about the Great Roman Revolution that took place in 509 BC. This revolution overthrew the last Roman king, abolished the monarchy, and established a new type of government called republic. This event is undoubtedly the most important in the history of Rome, because it was thanks to him that Rome began to transform itself from a mediocre city in central Italy into the capital of the Mediterranean. In this video, I'll tell you how it all began. In the last program, I told you that the king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, had earned the universal hatred of the Senate and the Roman people by his tyrannical rule. No one was willing to tolerate his rule any longer. That is, the revolutionary situation in Rome was already fully formed. All that was needed to start a revolution was an occasion, and such an occasion arose in 509 BC. Tarquinius was then waging war against the Rutulians and Volscians. One evening, in the king's camp at Ardea, his son, Sextus Tarquinius, was debating with a relative, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, the comparative virtue of their wives. Collatinus proposed that they should take horse to Rome and surprise their wives in the late hours of the night. They found the wife of Sextus feasting with intimates, but Lucretia, wife of Collatinus, was spinning wool for her husband's clothing. Sextus was inflamed with desire to try Lucretia's fidelity and enjoy her love. A few days later, he returned secretly to the home of Lucretia and overcame her by force. Lucretia sent for her father and her husband, told them what had happened, and then stabbed herself to death. Thereupon, Lucius Junius Brutus, a friend of Collatinus, called upon all good men to drive the Tarquinius from Rome. He himself was a nephew of the king, but his father and brother had been put to death by Tarquinius, and he had acquired his nickname, Brutus, meaning idiot, by feigning madness in order to be spared. Junius Brutus summoned the Senate and convinced them of the need to revolt, overthrow the king, and sent the entire royal family into exile. When Tarquinius learned of the unrest in the capital, he hurried to Rome, but when he arrived, he found the city gates closed. At the same time, Brutus arrived to the army, told Lucretia's story, and won the soldiers' support. When Tarquinius learned of this, he fled north to Etruria. There, he hoped to find support and regain his throne. In Rome, however, a citizens' assembly was held to establish a new constitutional order. To prevent anyone from usurping power in the future, it was decided that instead of a king chosen for a life, 2 consuls with equal powers would be elected each year. These 2 consuls were Brutus and Collatinus, but Collatinus resigned and was replaced by Publius Valerius, who won the name Publicola, friend of the people, by putting through the assembly several laws that remained basic in Rome. Any Roman citizen may be elected consul. Any man who should try to make himself king might be killed without trial. On the basis of this law, the murders of Julius Caesar were later acquitted. Any attempt to take a public office without the people's consent should be punishable with death. Patricians are punished for disobedience to the consul more severely than plebeians. Any citizen condemned by a magistrate to death or flogging should have the right to appeal to the assembly. It was Valerius who inaugurated the custom whereby a consul, upon entering the assembly, must part the axes from the rods and lower them as a sign of the people's sovereignty. The revolution took place, but every revolution must be able to defend itself. Tarquinius, who had fled to Etruria, appealed to Lars Porsena, chief magistrate of the Etruscan city of Clusium, to help him return to the Roman throne. Lars Porsena collected an army from the federated cities of Etruria and advanced upon Rome. At the same time, an attempt was made in Rome itself to restore Tarquinius. The two sons of Brutus were among the arrested conspirators, and the fiery first consul provided an exemplar for all later Romans when he witnessed in stoic silence the flogging and beheading of his children. Meanwhile, Porsena's troops approached the city. In the battle of Silva Arcia, Junius Brutus, who commanded the cavalry, was killed. The battle itself ended in a draw. Each side claimed victory, but the Etruscan offensive continued. If the legends are to be believed, the Romans showed wonders of heroism during this war. According to legend, a young man named Gaius Mucius, with the approval of the Roman Senate, sneaked into the Etruscan camp with the intention of murdering Porsena. However, Mucius misidentified his target and accidentally killed Porsena's secretary. When he tried to escape, he was immediately captured by the Etruscans and brought before the king. Mucius was straightforward about who he was and what he intended to do. He told Porsena that he was only the first of 300 Roman youths, ready to set out at any moment to finish what he had started. To provide his bravery, Mucius thrust his right hand into a fire and held it there, without any sign of pain, earning for himself and his descendants the cognomen Scivola, which means left-handed. Porsena was shocked by the young man's bravery and dismissed him from the Etruscan camp, leaving him free to return to Rome. Another legend tells that at the decisive moment of the battle, the Romans, unable to withstand the onslaught of the enemy, retreated, leaving behind the only bridge over the Tiber. Then Horatius Cocles alone held off the enemy until his comrades destroyed the bridge behind him. With the bridge destroyed, Horatius Cocles threw himself into the Tiber in his armor. Unharmed, he swam under a hail of arrows to his own. According to Livy, Porsena, impressed by the heroism of the Romans, refused to storm the city and retreated. However, it's more likely that a treaty was signed between Rome and Porsena, in which Porsena refused to conquer Rome, and Rome gave up parts of its territory. Roman territory returned to the boundaries that had existed under Romulus. Under this treaty, Rome lost some of its power, but the fruits of the revolution were preserved. However, Tarquinius continued to insist that Porsena help him return to the throne in Rome. In 507 BC, Porsena again sent ambassadors to the Roman Senate, asking for Tarquinius to be restored to the throne. Legates were sent back to Porsena to tell him that the Romans would never readmit Tarquinius, and that Porsena should stop asking for Tarquinius' readmission, out of respect for the Romans. Porsena agreed and told Tarquinius to continue his exile elsewhere than Clusium. Then Tarquinius went to his son-in-law Octavius Mamilius in Tusculum. The latter mobilized the Latin League against Rome, and in 499 BC, another united army marched on Rome. The decisive battle took place near Lake Regillus, between Rome and Tusculum. According to legend, the gods, Castor and Pollux, fought on the side of Rome. The Romans won. The combined army of the Latin League was defeated. Tarquinius escaped. Since he no longer had any allies willing to attack the Romans, he went into permanent exile in the city of Cumae. He died there in 495 BC. There were no further attempts to liquidate the young Roman Republic. The revolution was able to defend itself. Rome had won its freedom and was ready to take the next step in its journey. The Etruscan power had been expelled, but the marks and relics of Etruscan influence were to survive in Roman civilization to its end. The Romans believed that they had taken from Etruria the ceremonies of a returning conqueror's triumph. The purple-hemmed robes and the rods and axes carried before each consul by 12 lictors in token of his authority to strike and kill. The Etruscans gave Rome brutal gladiatorial contests and most of its religious rituals. But no matter how great the Etruscan influence was in Rome, after the proclamation of the Republic, the formation of a completely distinctive Roman culture began. A culture that shaped such well-known qualities of the Roman character as grave self-discipline, cruelty and courage, patriotism and stoic devotion. I'll talk more about these qualities of the Roman character and the daily life of the Romans at that time in the following video. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss it. At this point, I wish to conclude this video. If it was interesting, leave comments, put likes and repost. Thank you for your attention. See you later. Goodbye.